discuss a potential half-cent sales tax that could be placed on the November 2016 ballot. It is nice to have so many new faces at our meeting, and so I appreciate all of you, particularly for coming out. I'd also like to take this opportunity to welcome both to all the authority members and to those of you in the audience, Ms. Terry Ann Grover, who is joining us after years in Vallejo and other places, and she is now essentially taking the position that was held for many years by Denise Rosenbaum. So welcome, Terry Ann, and it's nice to see all these people came out to see you. So if we could all join with the Pledge of Allegiance. And Terry Ann, would you mind leading us this evening in the pledge?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Great. So the next item on our agenda is public comment. This is an opportunity for people to comment on an item that is not on this evening's agenda but within our purview. There will be time to comment on the agenda items as we go through them. So if you are interested in making a public comment, please fill out a speaker slip. And because we have so many of you here tonight, I'm going to ask that we ask everyone to limit their comments to 2 minutes as opposed to our normal 3, because while the number of speakers is higher than normal, the amount of time we have isn't more than we would usually have. So I have one person who wishes to speak under public comment, and that is Chris Shankar. Welcome.
So I'm Chris Shankar. I'm a citizen of the town of San Ramon. And the question I have here is, if you go down the southbound stretch of 680 from Walnut Creek to Milpitas, there's a segment between Crow Canyon and Alcosta Boulevard that does not have a sound barrier wall. In the last 10 years, the amount of traffic on 680 has gone up 60–70%. And many of us in homes that are on the west side, right off of San Ramon Valley Boulevard, we can hear this traffic 24 hours a day. It certainly affects a lot of our quality of life. And I have one of my neighbors also here. And I believe there is a groundswell of support to see if a noise abatement study can be done. What we're really looking for is direction from you on where to start and how to go about doing this. Because I've started this effort since 2005. And it's been 10 years, and I've gotten nowhere, and I'm really looking for direction on how to proceed. Thank you.
So it's not on tonight's agenda, but I would ask you to speak. Is Hisham in the audience? No. Okay. Randy, so maybe if you could speak to Mr. Iwasaki, outside of the normal course of the meeting, that would be great. Yes. Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak during this public comment portion of the meeting? Oh, okay, right. Nathaniel Arnold? Welcome, sir.
My name is Nathaniel Arnold. I work for AC Transit, and I'm an ATU 192 organizer and community activist. I'm here to speak about increasing funding for AC Transit. I attended a couple of meetings of WICTAC a couple of weeks ago, and I asked a question that Director Wallace, who sits on the WICTAC board, stated that adequate needs of the citizens here in this county have not been addressed when it comes to transportation over the last 16 years. I am one of those people that takes transit myself. I take the BART from Pittsburgh and the bus to get to work in East Oakland. I'm what they call AC Transit Special Forces. I'm a board operator, which means that I literally work all over the service county that AC Transit has jurisdiction. I've worked on the 72 line, and as a direct result of the money that was funded from Measure BB, the passage of Measure BB, we were able to increase headway significantly on that line, which were initially 20 minutes apiece and no weekend service on the 72R. And I can tell you as a driver that we had standing loads of people that were just miserable. But because of that initial funding provided by Measure BB, that 20 minutes went down to 7.5 minutes. And we have a service on the 72R on the weekend where we did not have that before. And it has made it more accessible to our citizens that use transportation to get more jobs, to have better access to education, to better themselves. It's made it better for our seniors who don't have to maneuver around their transportation needs to get to medical and dental appointments. It's made it better for the school people so that they can go to after-school programs and have access to jobs.
That everyone limit their comments this evening to 2 minutes. I think you've reached that.
Okay. Well, I would just like to say in closing that Frederick Douglass said, in reaching the great society, that we are no greater than the least among us. And there's only 3 things that separate all of us in this room: beliefs, egos, and fear. Let's do the right thing and increase funding for AC Transit. Thank you.
The other speaker I have under public comment is Julio Stack. Again, is this about the expenditure plan or about something unrelated to that?
Not unintended.
Okay, thank you. Welcome. And again, if you'd limit your comments to 2 minutes, please.
When Highway 4 bypass was planned, why was the negative impact on Byron Township not considered? Also, what is gained by taking property from 15075 Byron Road for a right-hand turn lane onto a dead-end street that goes to the Byron sewer ponds? Also, in the interest of health and safety, for the last half-century, we have spoke for 4-way stop signs, no signal lights.
Thank you for your comments. Perhaps I think a member of staff will contact you and follow up. Okay. All right. Anyone else wish to speak during the public comment period as opposed to on a specific agenda item? Seeing none, that brings us to item D, the approval of our meeting minutes from our special meeting of February 17th.
Move approval. Second.
Motion by Commissioner Romick, second by Commissioner Hudson. Any other comments? All those in favor, please say aye. 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 Great. So we've got 5 items to discuss under the development of the potential transportation plan. The first one really is just a reminder of what the process is. The second is to look at the draft TEP, and the third is the comments. I would ask that the commissioners agree to take particularly public comments on item 2 and 3 simultaneously. And then we've got a discussion on the urban limit line, and so I'd ask that we not discuss that under the TEP process. And then finally, a discussion of the draft governing structure, including a proposed citizen oversight committee. And again, that we not take that under item 1.2. So with that, I'd like to turn the discussion of item 1.1 over to Mr. Chittenden.
Great, thank you, Chair Tatson. Commissioners, I'll be brief on this item. Chair mentioned much of what I was going to talk about in terms of setting up the rest of the agenda. I did want to display the schedule again. We've seen this at some prior meetings. So tonight we're going to, as explained by the Chair, walk through the initial draft transportation expenditure plan that was made public first on February 22nd. We knew going into this that the expenditure plan had certain pieces that were incomplete, and we'll talk about that as we walk through it, and then we knew that there were areas that needed additional information or definition. So there's still quite a bit of work to be done, and really this is, I think, the start of the discussion here at CCTA. Getting the initial draft out is working. We're getting a lot of comments, so we'll provide an overview of the comments that we've received today. We'll get some comments here tonight, and then we'll get some additional comments from you. So looking at the schedule, kind of working it backwards a little bit, I really want to focus on the next couple of months, between now and the middle of May to get to the point where we have to have the final TEP. So we have, currently we have 2 additional meetings scheduled here in March to get through this first phase, shown in the orange bar, getting out a draft TEP. Tonight we're really asking you to listen to us as we explain the initial draft TEP, listen to the comments, listen to each other, knowing that you'll see a new draft, an updated draft for our meeting next Wednesday night. So we really want you to listen to what the changes we're going to make and the comments that we're getting. And what we really want you to do as we go through and talk about what to expect between now and next week, give us the input for the highlights where you think we're really missing the mark. So that's going to be most of the agenda here, at least the items 1.2 and 1.3. As explained by the chair, we will have a continuation of the discussion on the urban limit line, and then we're going to introduce some sections that we've talked about briefly related to governing structure and some implementation guidelines. And those 2 sections, we really do want to get your comments because with the urban limit line, that's a continuing discussion, and the governing structure and the implementing guidelines is really the first time that you've seen that and had a chance to comment on those. So we'll bring back an updated draft next week, and that's really when we want you to roll up your sleeves and start giving us the more specific direction on what you would like to see in this draft. Again, aiming towards having a draft that you're comfortable with on March 29th, our meeting on March 29th, something that you can get behind and go try to promote with your RTPCs, the other RTPCs members, and the other members of your council. So that's what we want to do here through the next couple of meetings. Broad overview today, update that we'll bring back to you next week, and then 2 meetings where you can really refine that to something that hopefully at least the board members that sit on this body has consensus and willing to take that out and sell it to your other members of the RTPCs and the council. So I think that really covers, well, I'm sorry, then after that, April will be another period of listening. We'll be asking the RTPCs to comment on that draft. We'll be working with EPAC both as the entire body. We have a meeting scheduled for April 7th. We'll continue our small group meetings with members of EPAC. We'll get comments from the public. Currently, we have a meeting scheduled for April 6th, I believe it is, the first Wednesday of April, and then another special meeting coinciding with our regular board meeting on the 3rd Wednesday of April. If we do keep the first meeting on April 6th, we want to make sure that that's a working meeting discussing the draft. We do not want to use that as a convenient reason to slip our March 29th schedule. We really need to keep that date. Otherwise, we're going to be cutting ourselves too short for any kind of review in April. So I don't know if we want to talk about it here tonight or maybe next week about whether that meeting is really necessary and what we would do at that meeting. We'll regroup on the first Wednesday of May with another draft that has the input that we received in April. That'll be another intense working session, again with the goal of having the final draft ready to circulate to the cities for their adoption and to the counties for their adoption at our May special meeting on the 3rd Wednesday of the month. So we really have a tight timeline. We have, lost count of that, is about 4 or 5 meetings, so there's a lot of work to do, and I'll end my comments and hopefully we can get at it.
Ask the authority members as we go through tonight's meeting and also the meeting on the 16th that sort of think about, and we'll come back to discuss it on your calendar, whether we should schedule a 4th meeting for March. Depends upon how far we think we're getting. I don't think it's appropriate to commit now. Commissioner Abelson, you got a comment?
Yeah, I just had a question about the inclusion of the RTPC's recent comments for next week.
Yeah.
They're not here.
Yeah, thank you. I had that in my notes, and I was trying to go through that without reading my notes. So certainly WICTAC has already provided your comments. Transplan and TransPAC meet this week. SWAT's meeting about 3 times a month now. So we'll include what we have. Certainly we can include the WICTAC, and then depending on what comes down to Transplant and Transpac tomorrow, we'll include that as well.
Any other questions or comments about this by any members of the authority or members of the public? Okay. Okay, Elaine Welch. And Elaine, I don't know if you were here when we started this meeting, but we're going to ask everyone for 2 minutes, right? Welcome.
I'm going to try to take one. Okay. A lot of people to talk. I want to thank you for allowing us to speak tonight. I was at your last meeting and felt very warmly received on a topic about, it's actually number 12 in the draft, which is accessible transportation for seniors and people with disabilities. We are working very hard at Mobility Matters to bring this to fruition while we speak around the entire county, but we have no funding from Measure J or from any TEP, and we're working very hard to leverage what funding we have. This we see as an incredible opportunity. Free programs are not free to run, and we appreciate very much that we are included in this and hope you will continue to not only consider it, but as all of us want with the pie, I assume a larger piece of the pie. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So anyone else who would like to speak on item 1.1? If not, then we'll move on to a combination of items 1.2 and 1.3, which deal with the draft TEP that was distributed on February 25th, and also the comments that we've received since then. Mr. Chittenden again.
Great, thank you, Chair. And I'll be tag teaming with Bill Gray, with Gray Bowen Scott, our consultant for this effort. So this is agendized as an information item to provide you with an overview and status on the initial draft TEP. So I'm going to actually walk through this document category by category. The intent here is to give you an overview of what we are trying to say in the draft TEP and some of the thought that went into the process of putting this together. And then really just seek your concurrence on direction, again, where you think that what we have in here is missing the mark. And I will try to identify those areas where we know we're going to be making changes between this draft and what you will see next week. So you may wish to follow along in your packet, because I'm going to be going through it kind of page by page, and you can either listen or follow through. So beginning on page 1-2-5, it's attachment A to the staff report. We're including a draft preface, and the preface is a combination of the goals, the vision and goals that were adopted by this body when you adopted the principles for development of a transportation expenditure plan. So that's the top half of the page here with the 6 goals listed. And then the bottom part of the page, which are the implementation goals, this is really a synthesis of discussion that we had with the EPAC, again, as we worked with them to put together a vision and principles for what they wanted to see out of the TEP. We believe, staff and the consultant team believe, that they're compatible. You'll see that there are some strike-through and markups on the introduction paragraph and a couple of initial bullets, and that is just to alert you that those are some suggested changes from the principal document. So that initial paragraph and what was previously 5 bullets was taken word for word out of the principal's document. So we showed it in strike through and changes just to alert you that those are suggested changes from what you've adopted. So if you have any comments on that, we'll look for that later as we go through the document. Attachment B, starting on page 1.2-7 of your packet, is really the meat of the expenditure plan. The outline on page 2 highlights the major sections, and this is really organized very similar to what you saw in Measure J. So it's something we're familiar with, and we thought we would just start with that. So we'll walk through the table of allocations, the summary of the projects and programs, some of the policies. The last 4 bullets on that outline, Complete Streets Program, Regional Advanced Mitigation Program, Governing Structure, Implementing Guidelines, or not in Measure J. So those are new sections that we're proposing to add, and we'll discuss each one of those as we go through. Page 3 is a table of allocations that add up to 100% of the projected revenue. The notes on the right column just are to note that we had an early version of this that went out with an error, so we just wanted to correct for folks that saw the early version that we did are recommending, or not recommending, but we're including in this version $140 million, which represents 6% of the overall revenue for Community Development Investment Grant Program. And to fund that at that level, we reduced the regional choice category. And again, I'll walk through each of these items line by line. The detailed description starts on page 5 of 30 of the TEP. So category 1 is the local streets maintenance and improvement. This program is consistent with Measure J. The return to source, it's a subject of compliance with the authority's reporting, audit, and growth management program requirements, maintenance of effort, and potentially including some additional checklist items that have been subject of our discussions over the last several special authority meetings. Just a little more background. At our February 3rd meeting, there was consensus to fund this at a minimum of 18%, and then to consider an additional return to source amount as an incentive to stimulate housing production or expenditures for non-motorized transportation purposes. We talked about this again at our February 17th meeting, where we shared a proposal from the Public Managers Association to fund this category, the return to source, at 23% and eliminate proposal for the incentive program. And that followed a meeting of PMA, Public Managers Association representatives, and several EPAC members, where the PMA members vehemently opposed this type of incentive program. They just felt it was putting agencies in competition, and it just did not work. So this initial draft includes the PMA proposal. I think I'd like to flag this, and I think, I'm sure Bill will talk about it a little bit more under the next item. I'm sure this will remain a contentious issue. You're likely to hear comments to that regard tonight. If you refer to attachment B to the next item, item 1.3, it's a joint letter from Bay Area Council, BIA, and the East Bay Leadership Council, which strongly encourages the authority to condition at least 5% of return to source towards achieving housing production. I'm sure this is one of the topics we'll continue to discuss as we go forward. Category 2 is major streets, complete streets, traffic signal synchronization program. The RTPC's requested $280 million for this category, so I think as we go through the RTPC review, it's likely to see that the funding in here that we show at $200 million may increase. This category is to address traffic smoothing in a responsible way that provides major streets as facilities for all users, cars, bus, bicyclists, and pedestrians. Later, we'll talk about a proposed complete streets policy. That policy is, when we get to that, we'll see that it's being replaced. So when you get your next version of this, I think you'll see the category, or the description for this category, and the complete streets policy. We'll see some major revisions, so we'll bring that to you next week. Category 3 is the BART capacity, access, and parking improvements, shown at $300 million. And we discussed this at length at our last meeting on February 17th. There's strong support from many members of EPAC for additional BART cars, as well as some of the other improvements shown. Many folks oppose using the land around BART stations for additional parking. They see that there would be better use for that land in transit-oriented developments or other types of developments, and don't want to see additional parking near those stations. There'll continue to be outstanding issues related to the discussions on a regional solution to acquiring the BART cars. So we talked about that on February 17th. I don't think there's really anything to add to that discussion that at least Randy and I have been part of, and maybe Director Murray, if there's any update, you can do that when we get into discussions. And then recently there's been other concerns expressed about any level of funding for BART. So obviously this is going to be a category that we'll be discussing quite a bit going forward. Category 4 is the East Contra Costa Transit Extension, so that's BART or other kind of high-capacity transit. This item is consistent with the Trans Plan ask. Again, the intent is to provide high-quality and higher-frequency transit further into East County. The amount shown obviously would not fund an E-BART extension to Brentwood, so how this actually gets used, we're looking. The language includes the ability to look at alternatives.
Ross, if I could interrupt you after the end of this sentence. Well, I didn't know how the sentence was going to end.
I think I just had a sentence.
Well, and all I wanted to say was we'd expected Supervisor Glover here this evening, and I think he's still coming.
I'm working on it here, believe me.
But Supervisor Pifo is in the audience, and she is the alternate, so if you would like to come up,
We checked that. She is not the alternate.
Oh, she's not?
No, believe me.
So
That's why I'm texting back.
It's
and
Supervisor
forth.
Anderson for both of you?
She's coming.
Okay. All right.
And I'm sure she would have liked to talk about E-BART. But
Chairman, I actually am an alternate, but I'm third in rotation, so if Candace is coming, that's fine, but if you get to a point where you need
Okay.
representation of the county and no one else is here, I'm happy.
All right, great. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt. Just wanted to make sure.
And because Candace is running into traffic, and so I'm trying to tell her whether to, so we may have Ms. Pifo up here.
So we need to do that major streets category. That's right. Right.
all right, so picking up where I was, so we have the language that allows for an initial transit center if we're unable to leverage these dollars into a full BART extension. That's very common. These kind of extensions start with a transit center, and then BART will make its way out there. One point I would say, you can expect that the next version of this of the draft will have the language removed regarding acquiring BART cars from this category. That's really more appropriate from the prior category 3. Categories 5, 6, and 7 are very similar in the intent, which is to address traffic flow on our major commute corridors. The problems on these corridors affect cars, they affect buses, they affect cars and buses trying to get to BART stations. So clearly, many of our folks are experiencing delays and loss of time with their families or jobs while they sit on these corridors. We've seen significant increase in delays on these corridors in the last 5 years or so, or maybe the last 2 or 3 years as the economy rebounds. I-80 continues in the morning as the worst commute corridor in the Bay Area. Northbound 680 is now the 5th worst commute corridor in the Bay Area. So these categories as they're written right now are intended to use flexible language. A lot of the solutions are being defined almost as we speak. Starting with Category 5, the I-80, as I think we all know, WCTAC is working on a high-capacity transit study that would help define how transit solutions can address this chronic congestion on the corridor. Now, we do know that the study will not be completed by the election, so we're trying to keep the language flexible so that they can use the funding to implement the outcomes of the study. As Commissioner Abelson mentioned, WCTAC met last week and commented on this category. Their recommendation is that we take $30 million from this category and add it to Category 10 for the bus operations. They'd like to see us break out $60 million for specific purposes to improve interchanges, including $55 million to complete Phase 2 of the San Pablo Dam Road interchange. Phase 1, as you may know, is